listen to this, quote, "When you are outside government, you have a very broad look at things, even though you don't have access to details. So when you come into government, you begin to see the details, the things you want to do and the things you cannot do, and the resources are not as enormous as people think." End of quote. Well, hello and welcome. This is 60 Minutes with me, Angela Jetumobi. I thank you for joining me on the program today. Now, my host today says he started addressing himself as a professor even in his third year in high school because he only ever wanted to read up to the PhD level. He's a respected academic, respected administrator, a writer, a poet, a former member of the editorial board of the Guardian newspapers here in Nigeria, with a first degree in theater arts, a master's degree in English and dramatic literature. His first real job, he says, was as a lecturer at the Ondo State University in Ado-Ekiti. That was the name of the university at that time, the then Ondo State University in Ado-Ekiti. He's one of those who have made that move from the academic world into politics. The position of a commissioner which he holds, he says, it's a privilege. It's one of service to people. It imposes responsibility. I'm quoting him now. He says, because of the privileged position, you have access to all kinds of things. You can be influential in your community, in your local government. You can make things happen. You can assist in different ways. End of quote. So join me after the break. I'm counting down 60 minutes with Hope Eghagha, a professor, a former lecturer in the University of Lagos, Department of English, and currently the Commissioner for Higher Education in Delta State, the South region of Nigeria. Well, welcome back. Welcome, Professor Eghagha. Thank you very much for coming on 60 Minutes with me.
Thank you, too, for having me on your program.
Thank you very much. Now, let's start from my introduction. I talked about how you said that when one is outside government, one has a broad look at things, even though one doesn't have access to the details. But when you come into government, you begin to see these details, you see the things you want to do, the things you cannot do, and the resources are not as enormous as people think. And I'm looking at that statement coming from somebody like you who is a social activist, a writer, you've been a journalist, been on the editorial board of the Guardian newspapers, and I know you must have criticized government at some point in your career.
Yes.
So to make that admission, was that something you just had to let people know?
As a man of conscience, whoever is interested in development in society
Yes.
Must be sincere to himself. You must be sincere. You must be able to acknowledge the truth. In a sense, when you say the truth shall set you free.
Yes.
For me, that's very deep. Having been outside government all my life until 2009, of course, I was a very keen observer of the workings of government. I'd always thought that things could be done differently.
Yeah.
Even when persons of my father's age at the time were speaking on television, radio, reading their speeches, listening to their speeches, I thought things could be done differently. So when I then had a platform, when I had, as it were, a column in The Guardian.
Yes.
I wrote for The Sun and I wrote for The Nation using my pen name, Ruki Osime.
Yes.
I tackled issues of national interest.
Right.
I did so for The Guardian in my name. Now, at that time, take for instance, education.
Yes.
All of us out there cry about education, the falling standards of education, and what we think government can do about revitalizing education at the basic level, at the secondary level, at the tertiary level, about remuneration for teachers,
Right.
providing infrastructure, all of these. When you're outside government, you see that all of this can be done perhaps within a year. But when you join government and then you begin to understand the bureaucracy, it's a different kettle of fish.
Yes.
There's a level of conceptualization because it's media. It cannot be in the budget. You have to wait for next year. When the budget is appropriated,
Yes.
it becomes law. You then have to do a memo. It has to go to the executive council, the governor, and it's approved. And then you start the process of awarding the job. It takes time. It takes time. Bureaucracy can be efficient, can also be inefficient. Bureaucracy could help a system.
Yes.
It could also serve as a drawback for a system. It depends on those who are operating the bureaucracy. So if I may summarize that,
Yes.
it's not as you see it when you are outside government. When you come in, you see you have a different picture.
Right.
That is the reason sometimes critics, when they join government, they don't actually succeed. Because they want to get things done and get things done immediately.
Yes.
But it doesn't happen like that in real life. You have to follow due process.
Yes.
And how to meander through the labyrinth of bureaucracy is part of growth, part of self-development in the business of governance. In order for government to succeed, it's a collective. Those who are in government know that even a clerical officer could thwart your dreams.
Yes.
Your PAMSEC, who does not cooperate with you, you could have challenges in implementation.
Yes.
Not to talk of the directors or the administrative officers. I mean, a file moving from one desk to the other, from one ministry to the other, something could happen to it. And you then start rewriting, so it's a collective thing, it's not a one-man thing, but you need a driving force.
Right.
If you're going to head any establishment, whether in the private or public sector, you must have a vision, you must have a dream, and you have to push. So essentially, I've remained an academic. The fact that I am Commissioner for Higher Education shows that I'm still on my turf, which is education and tertiary education. I mean, I went into the university in 1978 as a student, and I graduated, didn't do any other work. I started teaching, and then I came here. So you can see that there's a thread. The new dimension is the political angle, which I have learned. And in the last elections, I was able to deliver my word, for which I'm very grateful.
And I was going to go there. The last election, the Delta Central senatorial elections, I didn't think you were interested in the politicking of election campaigns.
The secret of playing a part is to think yourself into it. When you are robed in the regalia of a masquerade, you have to dance like that masquerade.
Yes.
I came into the office, and when we had a candidate in the person of Emmanuel Agbaria Wudu for the senatorial district, Central, where I come from, Robo mainly, 99.9%, all Robo. Some of us in government have not been very comfortable with the fact that our representative in the highest legislative chambers in the country was from an opposition party, and he happened to be the only candidate of that party in the chambers. We were uncomfortable because in politics, in governance, you do a lot of lobbying. And when you are from an opposition party in Africa, you must realize that there is a limit. There is a limit. There is how far you can go. So we thought that The Robo people had always voted mainstream, right from the earliest times, and we thought we should return. So this time, fortunately for us, with the hard work of the governor, when he went about reconciling persons who had left the PDP,
Yes.
who had gone to DPP, who had gone to APC, he said, look, come back to your original party. And 2 weeks to the time, quite a number of them came back.
Yes.
That accounts for the massive landslide victory of the PDP in the last elections, no matter what some persons, sour grapes, have said. So
Yes.
it was then my duty as a commissioner from Okpe local government to work with other leaders in the local government to ensure that we delivered.
Yes.
And I relocated. I went back home to my village and sat down with the people, drank with them, ate with them.
Yes.
And they voted massively for us. We didn't need to induce anybody. For them, I was their son. I am their son. I'm in government. And this government has done well by them. Government has given them roads, water supply, electricity supply, building a school. And they thought, well, their son should remain in government and they were going to vote PDP.
Yes.
So I was happy to be part of that experience. We all worked like that in the local government. All of us went back home. The governor had a meeting with all appointees from Central and said, look, in every ward in the 8 senatorial districts of Delta, there is at least one government appointee. And the marching orders. Go back to your ward, go back to your unit and deliver. We're not talking about the local government now. We're talking about a ward. I come from a ward, and if I'm a commissioner, if the next man is a chairman of a board, you should be able to tell your people, convince your people. If you've represented government well there, by your personal conduct, by what you've been able to attract, these people should be able to vote for you.
Was there a threat that if you didn't deliver your word, don't think of coming back to this cabinet?
Well, we will not call it a threat.
Yes.
But you see, on your own, you will say, look, if person A is able to deliver his word, person B is able to deliver her word, why can't I?
Yes.
And if everybody delivered and you couldn't come back, you couldn't deliver, how could you come back to the cabinet? So it was there.
Yeah.
Not a threat, it was, I wouldn't call it a threat, it was a marching order. Go and deliver. If you don't deliver, there are consequences. And naturally, if you are a representative of government in a ward, in a unit in the local government, and
surely you should be able to.
You should be able to.
Yeah.
So if you can't, then you don't have a place in government. So to that extent, you could say it's a threat.
Yes.
So all of us went back and the rest, as they say, is history.
Interestingly, the other two main parties, APC and DPP, are complaining. You've admitted that, you know, the Robos being served by the late Senator Pius Ewerido were no longer mainstream. But Senator Ewerido was actually from the PDP.
He was a thoroughbred PDP man.
Yes.
I mean, having been in the legislature here for so many years.
Yes.
And rose
in the local House
level.
of Assembly here.
Oh yes, and to the management level in the House of Assembly, he was essentially a PDP man. And there was disagreement. In a big family, usually there are disagreements. So he crossed over to the PDP, to the DPP. Now, at that time, we could say his personal popularity also helped him, and he was voted for, and he went into the Senate. In the last election, quite a number of persons in DPP came back, and as they did that, they came with their supporters.
Right.
Take, for example, Eghagha, which is the home base of the main opponent to the incumbent governor during the rerun and in the elections of 2011.
Yes.
Immediately his own brother, Chief Julius Ogboru, came back to PDP. His followers came back. What that shows is that the man himself wasn't on the ground. He was depending on people. And once these people left, he no longer had a following.
He was naked.
Oh yes, he was. So I just came into the system, maybe 4 years now. DPP was on ground in the 2011 elections. But this time they were not on the ground. True.
Yeah.
APC, just imagine. How is it that you want votes from a section of your community, from a town, from wherever, and you never visit?
That town.
You never visit. Your representative never goes there. You're on television campaigning in Lagos on channels or AIT. These fellows who are going to vote don't watch television, they don't listen to the radio, and they are going to vote for you because you are popular on the pages of the newspapers.
Yeah.
It's a different thing entirely. So it's a free world. You can contest anything you want to contest. I do believe that since these matters will be going to the tribunal, they'll be put to test that.
Yes.
But PDP bounced back very firmly. In fact, it was a pleasant surprise for us, the way we won. It was. Acknowledge that openly. It was a pleasant surprise because we went all out to ensure that we did that. That is the history behind the success of the PDP in the senatorial election in Central.
Dental Central. All right, join us again after the break.
Who knows abi better thing? Abi who no like better thing? All these fine things wey dey see so. Na money government dey take do am now. Abi, it's like, I mean, excuse me, I dey pay my tax. I dey do wetin? I dey pay my tax. Say you don't pay your own tax. Have you pay your tax?
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, it's 60 Minutes with me, Angela Jetumobi. On my hot seat today, Professor Hope Eghagha, the Commissioner for Higher Education in Delta State, the South-South region of Nigeria. Now, enough of politics, Professor. Let's talk about your duties as Commissioner for Higher Education. Higher education means you're in charge of tertiary institutions here in Delta State. So how many of these institutions actually exist?
Well, Delta State has 7 tertiary institutions. We have 1 university with 3 campuses. The main campus in Eghagha. We have an engineering faculty in Ole. We have a faculty here in Asaba, Anwai, that hosts agriculture. But the main campus is in Eghagha, so 3 campuses. We have 3 polytechnics. We have one in Agwashiku. Okay. We have a second in Otefi, Ogara, and we have a third in Ozoro. We have 2 colleges of education, one in Agbo, the other in Wari, and then we have a college of physical education in Mosuga. Although there are 7 institutions, they operate on 10 campuses.
Right.
And the duty of the Commissioner for Higher Education is to serve as a bridge between these institutions and the government. That way, you bring the needs of these institutions to the attention of government, and also you extend the policies of government to these institutions, using the governing councils, management. You're the eye of government on these institutions in terms of infrastructure, in terms of standards, in terms of all of it. So it's a very big thing, and some people are surprised that we have a Ministry of Higher Education.
Yes. And
some states in the country don't have, some just have 1 institution, 1 tertiary. Yeah. So they have a Commissioner for Education who oversees all of this.
Yes.
In my view, really, that should be the standard for the country. The Education Ministry is so big to be left for 1 person, for 1 commissioner or 1 minister. Yes. It should be split so that there will be attention to details. We have basic fundamental challenges in education that I think that we need to declare a state of emergency in education in this country.
That's nationally.
Nationally, yes. All right. Nationally.
The 10 campuses, are they spread through the 3 senatorial districts?
Oh, yes, they are.
Of
yes,
Delta?
They are. Yes, they are. You see, one of the basic challenges we have in education in Africa, in Nigeria, is access. 2 ways. 1, funds to educate yourself, and 2, proximity. When I was growing up as a boy in Delta State, the only federal university we had here that came much later was the University of Benin.
Yes.
But before then, if you wanted to go to a federal university, you had to go to Lagos, you had to go to Ife, you had to go to Ibadan. Now, what we've done in Delta State is to ensure that you can have access to tertiary education without traveling so far. If you want to go outside Delta State, that will be a question of choice. But right now, as it is, you can live in your hometown and go to the tertiary institution, a polytechnic, a college of education, or the university next door.
Yes.
That way, one, you reduce transport costs. I do know that when it's time to go back to school for some parents, the transport money becomes a challenge. Fare yourself from Warri to Lagos, that itself is a challenge. Yeah. Fare yourself to Jos.
Yes.
So what we've done is to ensure that there's proximity. And these institutions have had a multiplier effect on the socio-cultural dynamics of these communities where they are located.
In what way? Okay,
take for instance Eghagha, where you have the university. Originally, it was a college of education,
right,
and it became a university in the 90s. Now, what has happened is that, one, petty traders have regular, constant customers. The landlords, if you build, you have tenants. So the economy of Eghagha is better, for instance, than the economy of, let me not mention any town, maybe
yes,
2-3 towns away where you don't have students.
Yes.
Any community where you have students, the dynamics change immediately.
Yeah.
One, their presence improves the social life.
It's vibrant.
It's vibrant. The culture, the dress culture changes.
Yes.
The kind of things that they would like to wear, the kind of food they would like to eat. So it attracts business.
Yes.
Then there is infrastructural development. People build houses, you build hostels, transportation is improved. The market woman who sells petty things, fish and all of that. Yeah. It's in all towns where you have tertiary institutions in Delta State. You have it here in Awine, the color is changing, Ozoro, in Ole. It changes. In Ole houses the Faculty of Law, for instance. And as a young man in Ole, you find these young men, women who are training to be lawyers, dressed, well dressed every day. You may not know how many people that has inspired. So in Ole, the young men and women there who perhaps they don't have any ambition to go to school, they find our law students dressed in black trousers, white shirts, tie.
With tie.
So well, how can I be like that?
Yes.
You see, that perhaps that's not so serious, but you may never know. So we're talking about the culture, we're talking about economics, we're talking about politics, we're talking about sociology. All of these put together can bring development about in any environment.
So do you think that our students in universities here are paying enough? Do you think that what they're paying will give them quality education?
Well, I hope you will permit me to speak as Hope Eghagha.
Yes.
I'm not speaking now as
the Commissioner
for Higher Education.
Right.
And I'm not going to make a policy statement.
Right.
I just know that education has to be funded. I just know that we have to pay for education. I also believe that somebody has to pay for education. It is not a popular position to advocate in 21st century Nigeria that our students should pay more for education. I just know that we need more funding for education. Having been a student here, having been a teacher, having been somebody in government, we need more funding. We need funding for basic things, stationery. We need funding to build laboratories.
Yes.
We need funding to have enough power supply 24 hours on campus. We need modern libraries. We need comfortable hostels for our students. We don't want our students to live in hostels like second-class citizens. We don't want 15 students, 16 students staying in a hostel room, space meant for 4, you're given to 16. What you do to the psyche of the student is that, look, you are less than normal. That's the reason 18 of you share bed space.
Yes.
Now, when you have 100 students sharing 4 toilets, what kind of students are we breeding?
And these are the realities.
These are the realities, yes. The federal universities in the state universities. We need more facilities. We need more teaching staff. It doesn't make sense for one man to teach a course where you have 250 students, 500 students, and you're expected to give 2-3 assignments,
yes,
one test before the exams, and then grade all. Something is wrong.
Yes.
I do believe that we need to really sit down and address all of this. We must recognize one point. Let me say this as a precedent, which is that, or as a rider, that education is a social service to the people, because when the people are properly educated, the multiply effects on society are enormous. They are there, they are eternal. Now, having said that, it still has to be paid for, either by the government,
yes,
or by organizations and philanthropists, or by the direct beneficiaries. Now, those three. In a society where the government is able to afford free education at all levels, and the government is able to fully fund, it's a different matter entirely. Then government should go ahead.
yes.
But in the Western world, where so much development, progress has been made in education, we don't find the American government paying for everybody. We don't find the British government paying for everybody.
Yes.
We don't find the Japanese paying for everybody. No. People pay.
Yes.
If you get into Harvard, if you get into University of California,
Yeah.
you pay. The actual fee you're supposed to pay is that. Now, if as an individual you are indigent, you can't pay, perhaps a philanthropist pays the difference, or the government,
A foundation.
or a foundation, or you have wealthy parents and they pay. All right, so somebody has to pay. What I just know is, in terms of libraries, in terms of research, we need more funds. Having said that, when these funds have been provided, the onus is on the university management to properly manage these funds. Because there are question marks right now.
Yeah.
How well are these funds being managed? All right. That is the purpose of the NUC. That is the purpose of accreditation. That is the purpose of the 5-year visitation panels,
Yes.
which the visitor ought to set up. All right. But all of these are issues that we must need to address at a particular time.
Yeah.
In the early stage, we're trying to do all of these. We are trying to ensure that we meet our obligations to the institutions. Resources are scarce.
Yes.
You cannot do all at the same time. I worry that in some of the tertiary institutions across the country,
Yes.
often there is no power supply. How can you do research? How can you study effectively when 24 hours in 3-4 days there's no power supply? You depend on diesel generators and
Yes.
all.
Yes.
How many people can fund that? And students don't want to pay. I find it contradictory that a child who is in primary school, where the parent pays as much as 150,000 per year, gets into secondary, the parent is paying as much as 2.5 million.
Yes.
When the child gets to a federal university, they want to pay 50,000 naira. And when the government says you cannot pay 50,000, it has to be 150,000 naira, they are up in arms.
Do you think perhaps it's because people think that what else will this government, give us? They haven't given us electricity. They haven't given us the so-called dividends of democracy. The only thing they can give me is a university education, and they're telling me to pay.
Well, there is a point there when the people are disenchanted with social services. However, nothing is completely free.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
So somebody has to pay, which
Yes.
is the major point made. It's also not a popular opinion to say that not everybody who's in the university now should be there.
Yes, and that's another question. Must everyone go to university? Is it compulsory that once you finish high school or secondary school, as we call it here, you must go to university?
You see, if you go back to our history
Yes.
from the 60s, the university education was seen as an avenue to get a white-collar job. And to do that, that meant some stability, some guarantee for you in life that, all right? So that was there. It became a culture. But you see, at that time, not everybody went. It was highly competitive. How many universities did we have in the country? We had 3, then we had 5, we went to 8 and 9. For a long time, we had 9 universities, and then suddenly we have over 100 universities, public, private, state-owned, government, federal government-owned. So we have so many. Now, we have very many bright minds. However, must they end up in the university? To my mind, no. The 6334 educational system that was designed and introduced in this country, championed at the time by Professor Ali Babatunde, you know, Fafunwa.
Yes.
6 years, everybody. 3 years, you go in there, and the teachers evaluate your skills, and it's okay. Technical education will be okay for you, and you go
this way.
And at the end of 3 years in technical, you go to a polytechnic. But that was thwarted, because most persons believe that if you are a technician, you are second class, you are inferior. No. The emphasis on some of these courses we have in the polytechnics today, for me, is an anomaly. All right. Some of the courses in the university are being replicated in the polytechnics. No, the polytechnics are designed to produce hands-on graduates, persons who, with hands-on experience that can go into industry and change things. Now, the university thing became a status symbol. And if you then went to university, so yes, I'm a university graduate. So I think that we need a reorientation. Our people have to know that it is not a certificate that determines what you are. It is what you have up here that should determine what you are. There are quite a number of persons now who can defend their degrees. And as a university teacher, I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of the fact that there are some graduates who produce, take a degree in English, a BA English, second class, lower, third class, they can write correct sentences, something is wrong. You produce graduates in BZME who go into the field or accounting or engineering or in fact medicine. We ask ourselves, these are serious questions that we have to address. Now, how to address them is perhaps where you have the difference between the government and the unions. All right. But the major point is education has a serious challenge, and we need a national emergency to actually sit down and develop a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year plan to look at the details, and then with some consistency and logic, work out a plan. There must be these agencies that are stable. The politicians will come in and leave, but the civil servants, those agencies must remain, and let there be continuity
of policy.
Once it has been well thought out by all stakeholders, there could be a review after 10 years, after 5 years, after 10 years. Basically, the fundamentals remain the same. All right, the trajectory is the same, but the method of getting there, there might be slight changes. So it's a serious challenge for all of us in the country to think that people who went to secondary school in Nigeria in the 30s, in the 40s, 50s, could write better English, could speak better English than the graduates of today.
The so-called graduates of today. Well, join us again after the break.
Government wants our city to become a mega modern city. And so, government is providing modern markets for us to carry out our business. Now, this requires money. So, we need to pay our taxes to help government to help us. I pay my taxes. I hope you've paid yours. Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
Welcome back. My concluding moments now with Professor Eghagha. Now, you've talked about declaring a state of emergency in the education sector. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, recommends that 26% of national budget should be committed to education. Nigeria, as it stands, allocates less than 10%. It is the lowest in Africa. Are we all overrating education? Maybe it's not so important after all.
Well, education is very important. And the 26% minimum prescribed by UNESCO
Yes.
is a target which state governments, federal governments should work towards. Because in the developing world, we still contend with basic issues.
Right.
All right. Road construction, water, power supply, security challenges. So it becomes a hard task,
Yes.
devoting 26% of the budget to that. And that's the reason you find the budget for defense being
Yes.
so high.
Yes.
It's a practical thing. It's not to be justified. Well, I'm just trying to explain, on the basis of the knowledge that I have at this time,
Yes.
that perhaps that accounts for it. But in my mind, all state governments, federal governments should work towards that ultimately by ensuring that there is progress with each budget, with each year, tackle the challenges one after the other. The truth is the rot which we have in the educational system today did not happen in a year. It's gone for over 20 years.
Yes.
You know, it's been on. So to redress it, you might need as much as 40 years.
Yes.
Only, sadly, that is because apart from physical infrastructure, you're also going to deal with the persons who manage education. And you know, to do a reorientation, the
Yes.
teachers that you produce, garbage in, garbage out, you have to do all of that. And as I said, there has to be consistency, there has to be that determination, the will, the focus has to be there. It's not just a question of criticizing people, of condemning government.
Yes.
No, they're practical things. Even parents make wrong choices. Parents make wrong decisions for the children. Sometimes forcing them to study courses which they are not interested in.
Yes.
Parents want their kids to live their own dreams. Yes, the parents push their kids.
Go and do law.
Yes, you must read law. You must be an engineer. You must do medicine. You know, so that's part of the challenge. Then the teachers themselves. Time was in this country when the teacher was the model, the teacher was a role model, the teacher was an icon. The residence of the headmaster was the meeting point, where parents gave their kids to the headmaster, to the principal, for moral orientation.
Yes.
Now, he may not have been wealthy, but he wasn't a poor man. One sad thing which I've seen is often when there is a crisis, when we are not able to pay teachers in some other places, the other state the governor has made it a policy. Salaries first line charge, so salaries are paid here. We don't have that challenge.
First
in Delta
line
State.
charge.
Oh yes,
For teachers.
salaries for everybody, all civil servants in the state.
First line.
First line charge. Once we have the allocation and we have the IGRO,
Yes.
governor says, remove salaries first. What is left, we address other things. That's the reason we don't have salary backlog in Delta State. Yes. It's a deliberate policy. And between the 20th of the month and 24th, salaries are paid in Delta State.
Yes.
You know, so we have that history, and we thank God for that. The governor should be commended for that. It's a deliberate policy. Anytime there is lateness in payment, there is a phone call, what is going on?
Yes.
When a sector is not paid, it's not because somebody has said don't pay them, it must be because there is a lapse somewhere. So he said that.
Yeah.
Now often when there is a challenge in finances, in local governments, in states across the country, the first victims are teachers. People don't want to pay primary school teachers.
Yeah.
All right, but those are the persons to whom we entrust our kids first time. They're exposed there, they are taught, you know, how to get on in life. The very fundamentals of education. In a classroom setting, the teacher is very important. It's like a father, it's like a mother, surrogate father, a mentor, bastion of knowledge, or everything. Now, when that teacher is disenchanted, is not satisfied with working conditions, with the environment, it affects teaching. So all of us must return to that. Ensure that the teachers are well paid, the classroom environment is conducive. This is the 21st century. I imagine that from in primary 1 at the age of 6, a child should be familiar with a computer. All right? But how can a child use the computer in a school where there is no power supply?
Yes.
So you see, the problem we have in education is linked to the other challenges we have in society.
In other sectors.
Other sectors. We need power supply into these schools so that they can power the computers. I've donated some computers to the school in my community, and they are now saying, give us a generator. We need to, as a people, work towards full development of all the sectors of our national life.
This year, 2013, July 1, the Academic Staff Union of Universities ASU embarked on a national strike over the federal government's refusal to implement a 2009 agreement it signed with the union. That agreement contains several components, most important of which is the issue of adequate funding of education. Where do you stand on this?
As a teacher, I understand the implications of keeping children away from the classroom for 3 months running. Once education is truncated that way, of course, you're truncating development. You're truncating the thinking process. Then you're truncating also the development process stage by stage. I've always said, even while I taught at the University of Lagos, and I still do, and I still maintain that position,
yes,
there should be an alternative to prolonged strikes. By articles of our association, by fundamental rights, all associations except the army, the police have rights to go on strike.
Yes.
However, when the strike becomes counterproductive, the body involved should go back to the drawing board.
If you say it's counterproductive, all the things they've listed, which you have also agreed with, inadequate physical structure,
yes,
obsolete labs. I mean, some science students don't even know what a burner is.
That's right.
Should they call off a strike when all that is still there? Are you going to continue teaching someone who still doesn't know what a Bunsen burner is?
You see, if things are in place,
yes,
we would not need to get to this extent. But what I thought should be done at this stage is for there to be a compromise, which is, now we have recognized that there are challenges in the system.
Yes.
For this year, this budget year, we can inject so much funds into the system and do so.
Yes.
And then make a promise, make a commitment that in the next 1, 2, 3 years, in the next 4, 5 years, we are going to do X, Y, Z. Now, when they return to class, there should be timelines, laboratories, classrooms, remuneration, all of these. There should be timelines towards developing them. Now, there is a kind of irony I find in all of these. In spite of all of these challenges which the institutions have, accreditations have been going on.
Yes.
And these departments, these faculties are accredited and they pass the tests. They've passed the test in the last 10 years.
Yes.
Now we're going full circle to say those things are not there. So there is a lacuna.
Yes.
So the unions, Academic Staff Union of Universities, has the right to go on strike. The Articles of Association, the Constitution guarantees that. The government itself is obliged to funding education. So there is a breakdown somewhere where the unions believe that the government is not funding enough. It's not providing enough funds.
Yes.
The government believes that so much funds can be injected at a particular time. It should be a gradual thing.
Yes.
If we can summarize the contest like that between the two elephants, it is possible to go back to the drawing board and examine in the light of all of this and say, all right, we could do X, Y, Z
Yes.
within this time.
Yes.
And we could do this at the other time.
Stagger the work. Yeah.
We need to go back to school because you then go out after graduation, do a master's, you're going for a master's degree outside here. And so you're coming from that country where for 6 months you were not in school.
Is it true that it affects people who go for graduate school outside the country?
It does. Sometimes you go to some universities, you're not allowed to go in for the master's directly. You're asked to audit some courses at 400 level. Oh yes. Okay, and in Canadian universities now,
yes,
except you have a 2-1 from here,
from Nigeria,
except you have a 2-1 minimum, you cannot go directly to do the master's. You must do a diploma. As I speak, that is happening.
In Canada?
In Canada.
Even though you have a degree?
You have a degree, second class lower. You can't do an MSc directly. I think it's only about 3 universities you can do that. For the other universities, you have to do a diploma, pass the diploma for 1 year,
yes,
and then go for the master's. We need to take a holistic look at education and ensure that we give the best. If we use shortcuts now, yes, to achieve our objectives, our children in the next 20 years are going to suffer. And we are beginning to feel it already. I mean, yeah, way back in 1981, 82, when there were loud cries about the challenges we have in education, certain persons didn't take this seriously. Now yes, we have it.
Where we are now. Okay, now on October 21 this year at Chief E.K. Clark's fundraising, 25 billion naira fundraising ceremony held in Abuja, the governor of Delta State said, "No work, no pay will be applied for the ongoing strike by academic workers in DELSU, that's Delta State University, Abraka, because ASU's demands have no bearing with the lecturers in the state university," end of quote. So is the Delta State University affected by the ASU strike? How bad is it?
You see, the ASU has a constitution that makes it mandatory for all affiliates, all unions to go into solidarity anytime right, there's a strike. So once the national body calls its members on a strike, they are obliged to go. Right. That's what happens. Some of the private universities don't have unions, so their sessions, the academic
they're
sessions,
going ahead.
Now, in the state universities, some are not part of the strike. Even the federal university is outside the strike. University of Ilorin is outside the strike.
Right.
And both state governments have made some development, some progress with the state universities. And the demands of the national ASU is on national issues. Since you implement the agreement you signed with ASU 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
All right. Now, the state government did not sign that kind of agreement. The ones that concern us here in the state, as far as our resources can carry, we've implemented the retirement age, the funding, intervention. The state government is doing that. When they went on strike, there was a government statement, look, the government has met its obligations towards the union, towards the university, and it is not a view, it's not a belief that they should go on strike. But they went on strike. Now the Executive Council, chaired by His Excellency and the Governor of the state, took a decision that if you've been at home for 3 months, you're not working, and there's no real dispute, all right, in order to go on strike, you have to place the employer on notice. You said, look, for X, Y, Z, we are going on strike. Then we invite you for negotiations, and you begin to discuss this. The federal government itself has stopped paying salaries to federal universities. Yes, from September. And so the state government took that decision. We do hope that we will not implement it. We do hope that the ASU chapter here will suspend the strike and come back to class and start teaching. We've had a good relationship with the unions in the state. And we discuss all issues. We've tried to avoid strikes to ensure that there is harmony between the institutions and the government, between the students and all. So we are appealing, I'm using this medium to also appeal to the union generally to suspend the strike and go back to class,
Yes.
and then teach the students.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, for coming on 60 Minutes with me today. I'm sorry for imposing on you, but that courtesy call,
Yes.
you know, when I arrived here, some people waiting to see you. What was that about?
Well, the state government just appointed a governing board for the library, the state library.
Right.
Yeah, so the chairman, members, and the management team paid a courtesy call, came with a shopping list, things they would like to do.
Yes.
And then, of course, I charged them on their responsibilities. That it was part of the duty to ensure that the libraries are well developed, that as experienced men, successful men and women in society, they should attract funding, they should attract books,
Yes.
and use their influence in the state to lobby for positive things for the library.
Yes.
So that's what we did today. So it was an exchange, it was welcome, and I think the major points that had to be made were made, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Angela, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to like 60 Minutes with Angela on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, Angela at 60 Minutes. I'm Angela Ajetumobi. I thank you for the pleasure of your company.